touch of nostalgia this Christmas on BBC1. And tomorrow, EBC's broadcasting company takes the air.
Can you get him to sit in this? I want to see if it fits for Christmas.
The world's zaniest TV channel, EBC1.
Hello, I'm Andrew.
Hello, I'm Lisa.
And I'm the other one.
Welcome to episode 55 of...
Round the Archives.
Is it the Christmas special,
It
Lisa?
is the Christmas special, yes.
Didn't we do one last year?
We did, yes.
Well-
it seems to come round quickly again.
Well, people will be relieved to know it's not as big as it was last year.
Very few things are.
Thank you for that. So, lots to fit in. Mm-hmm. So here's you and me looking at...
Play school.
Here's a house. Here's a door. Windows 1, 2, 3, 4. Ready to knock. Turn the lock. Play school.
Happy Christmas Eve, Lisa!
Happy Christmas Eve, Andrew.
I hadn't realised when we picked this episode of Play School that the dates would mesh quite so well.
Yes.
But we'll get to that point
Yes.
in a minute. So, Play School. Do you have any memories of watching Play School?
I watched it, I'm sure. I don't have any specific memories. Well, apart from the toys. So I remember Humpty and Big Ted and Little Ted and the scary dolls.
The toys don't get much to do in this episode because it is Christmas Eve.
Yes.
And it's all tinsel and Christmas, isn't it? And presents and stuff.
Yeah.
But we start with the title sequence. And I hadn't really thought about this before. There's a few weird things about the title sequence. It's a house.
Yes.
Not a school. So is
Yes.
it meant to be your house?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you see.
Yeah.
And I notice it's a detached house.
Yeah, it's a proper kid's drawing of a house because it's
Yeah.
got 4 windows and a front door.
Yeah.
You know, because we lived in a semi-detached, so we only had 3 windows at the front.
Yeah.
We never lived in a house that had 4 windows.
We were semi-detached. I mean, God help you if you lived in a terrace house or a flat. You know, it's nothing like it.
No.
But it's a knock on the door and you turn the lock.
Yeah.
But if you've got the key to the house, why do you need to knock in the first
I don't
place?
know.
Are you breaking in or something? You know?
Just checking to see if anybody's there.
Yeah, if nobody answers the door, you've nicked the key and you can get in and steal the presents.
But they do a weird thing with the key because they turn it once
Yeah.
and then they turn it again, which should really lock it again.
Yeah.
It's like they unlock it and then relock it because they turn the key twice.
Wow. But it's Julie Stevens, ex of the Avengers.
Yes.
And I hadn't realised how much she does for Play
Yeah.
School. She's there from
A long while.
64 to 73, or like 431 episodes or something. You know, you associate Brian Cant with it,
Yeah.
but not so much Julie, I'd have thought. But yeah, so it's Julie Stevens and Brian Cant. We start off with Julie. She's hiding the presents.
Or trying to.
Not very well.
No, because one of them falls out of the basket.
She's got an oak-mask basket that dispenses presents on the floor the moment you sort of tip it sideways. And Brian's sort of hiding something behind his back as well, haven't they? And the studio's quite complicated sort of set dressing, isn't it? There's loads of Christmas cards.
Yeah.
So somebody's had to hang them up, and then you've got the tree, which has got some of that stringy silver tinsel on. Did you have that?
Yes. It just used to fall off everywhere.
Yeah, and
hanging it up took forever.
Yeah,
because you'd sort of flick it over the tree, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I used to be in charge of doing the tree after a while, so I used to festoon it with all this stuff. And yeah, once you got rid of the tree, for like days after, you'd be picking bits of loose stringy tinsel up. It would like go up the Hoover and all that. But we've got the date board turning the handle, and it's Thursday, December the 24th,
Yes.
1970.
Yes.
And I think this is episode 1743.
Right.
So I might be wrong. I might have got my wires crossed on that. But the date for Christmas Eve falls exactly the same day
this year
as this year, 2020.
Yeah,
so
50 years
later, the whole thing's meshed.
Yes.
And I hadn't realised that till today. But then we cut to Paul, whoever Paul is.
Well, he's the pianist.
Paul the pianist.
He doesn't actually get a credit at the end.
He doesn't get a credit. He doesn't get a surname.
No.
But he's brought his tubular bells along as well as his piano, hasn't he? And Brian's having a go on the bells. And they sing a song, "Why Do the Bells of Christmas Ring?" And I don't know how musical Brian Cant is, but he only has 2 notes to do, doesn't he? You know, ding dong, ding dong. What about pianos? Did you have a piano at school? Do you remember? Because I remember school pianos.
Yeah, they were never in tune, I don't think.
Yeah.
They had an upright one in the music room at school.
I was always a bit scared that the cover bit would slam down on your fingers as you were playing. I never learnt an instrument at school because there were some people that were in the wind band at QE.
Okay.
Warren could probably say I could make my own wind band, but I used to know somebody that used to play the cornet, and you don't trust me with an ice cream cornet, let alone a brass one. But yeah, anybody that actually had a piano in their house was really, really posh. Yeah. Whether it be upright or grand. But yeah, I was never a past master on the cottage upright. I mean, that was not my thing at all. But Paul has a go on the bells as well, doesn't he?
Yes.
And then Brian's got to move about.
Yes. They always do this, don't they? They do sort of moving about to music.
Yeah. I remember at first school doing music and movement.
Yeah.
It was on the radio, and they used to wheel out this radio with a sort of wooden surround and turn it on, and you'd wait for it to tune up, and you'd have to put your plimsolls on and then adopt strange positions in time to the music. And poor old Brian, he's having to go up and down and up and down.
Yeah.
You said he's going to do himself a damage in a minute, isn't he?
Because he ends up doing it quite fast, doesn't he?
You're meant to be doing this at home, but he keeps ending up with his foot in the air, doesn't he? And
he does these sort of footsteps thing, doesn't he?
I'd be arse over tit at this point, I'd be flailing about. Then Julie gets her oranges out, doesn't she?
Yes. Yeah, they're not even tangerines or satsumas.
There's big oranges. Yeah. And she's got her nuts and her dates on show as well, hasn't she?
Yeah.
Do you remember dates at Christmas?
Yes. And the bag of nuts that nobody ever ate, the sort of... It's not walnuts. They're not Brazils. The ones, are they Brazils? And the long.
I don't know what shape you're making.
Difficult
nuts.
Difficult nuts to open because the shell would ping everywhere, and then the nut would ping off, and you'd be like, "Oh, where's that gone?"
Yeah, but she lets us into the secret that Brian's present is a key ring, and I said, "No expense spent this year, then, love, is it?" Then we cut to the clock. And it's 9 o'clock.
Yes.
And this isn't the clock I remember from play school. This is a great big tall, sort of skinny thing with revolving plastic, they're like leaves at the back of it that go round. Yeah. And it looks hideously complicated. And I can't help thinking that must have broken down a lot during recording. And there's some presents at the bottom of the thing going round.
Well, you say presents, I say empty boxes.
Empty boxes, yeah. And I thought, I don't know what the scale is, but I think they're really, really small. So then the sort of highlight of the episode is we get a rendition of the 12 Days of Christmas. Because apparently a man wanted to give a lady something very special every day. Yeah.
12 days.
I know men like that. And that they go through the whole song. Do you remember the first time you encountered this song?
Not really.
No, because I got a vague memory of sort of singing it one year at school, and it would have been first school, and not really knowing the words after about 9.
No,
because it gets
increasingly complicated.
Yeah, it gets up to sort of after you've got all the drummers drumming and the lords leaping about. I can never remember the damn order even now.
Well, of course, you have to sing 5 Gold Rings really lovely, as per Russell T Davies.
Yeah, and all together now. 5 gold rings! Yeah. But Brian comes on.
Yeah.
Most of the things are cardboard representations,
yes,
aren't they?
They don't bring me like real pheasants. And not pheasants.
Pheasants? What version are you singing? Are you bringing in roadkill?
Partridges.
All right, that's the one. But yeah, they've sort of had to fiddle with the rendition a bit and extend it with twiddly bits to allow Julie to walk back and forth on the set and put all the stuff in position. Brian brings on the 5 gold rings.
Yes.
And one drops on the floor because there's a dirty great clonk.
Yes.
Because he's got them in his hand.
Yes.
And then they've fudged it by doing a sort of close-up shot of him putting the rings on her fingers, and suddenly there are 5. And I want to know how the mathematics of this song works. Did she get... Well, she got 5 gold rings on the 5th day.
Yeah.
But does she get 5 gold rings on the 6th day as well? Because you normally do the 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
So does she end up with like 40 gold rings by the end of the song?
Getting loads of gold rings. She gets 5 gold rings on
day
the 5th
5,
day, and that's it.
Because on day 6...
On day 6 she gets...
Whatever you get. But then usually you sing that you get 5 gold rings as well.
It's just a repeating thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
Didn't know like that she was drowning in rings by the end of it. Yeah, 8 maids are waiting, it suddenly becomes as well.
Yes.
They started off milking, and by the end of the
waiting.
song they're just waiting.
And I don't know if they didn't notice that they just couldn't be bothered to start the whole thing again.
No, I think somebody's gone, we are not going for a retake after getting through all of that, you know. Then the window. And today it's the round window, which I said was always the best window. Never like the arched window. That seemed like a cop-out when you couldn't think of a third shape.
Right.
You know, I can understand a round window and a square window, but who's got an arched window in their house?
People that live in posh houses.
And then we cut to a farm on film with some terribly wooden acting. As a lady says, "I'm just going into the village to buy some things. Look after the animals, won't you?" To some,
and feed them.
To some farm child. And another, like the way she just says, "I'm going to buy some things."
Yes.
Not specific.
No.
Hasn't got a clue.
No.
So she toddles up off the road in the Land Rover TMA 926D, which is smoking like billy-o out of its end.
Yes.
And I thought she needs her exhaust pipe riddled because it's smoking like mad. But a little bit of research tells me that TMA 926D is a Land Rover first registered in November 1966. Okay. So at this point it's only 4 years old, but because it's diesel it's just smoking. Its last logbook was issued on the 25th of March 1981 and its tax was due on the 1st of March 1983, and it is currently listed as untaxed with no MOT. So
it's long since
it's either been scrapped or is like rusting in a hedge somewhere, I don't know, which seems very sad. Then we get the kids feeding the cattle, and I bet they wouldn't normally do that if they weren't being filmed. They just go off in the woods and play with their conkers or something, you know. But we get some Box of Delights music, don't we?
Well, it's the music used for Box of Delights.
Used for Box of Delights. There's only 5 cows, so it's not the biggest farm in the world. And we go off to the village shop, which is definitely a local shop for local people, isn't it?
Yes.
And we get to look at some pottery, cows and horses. A hairy card.
Yeah.
It's a card with like a furry thing on it. Yeah. A koala bear, and the kid's fascinated by the car horn, isn't it? It's one of those big curly horns with a rubber bowl.
The honk honk ones.
Yeah, and the inevitable ship in a bottle.
Yes.
The presents they get actually end up being wrapped.
Yes.
Now I don't know whether the shop actually did this for them, because you said you'd pay more for that, wouldn't
you? Yes,
you
could get presents wrapped, but you'd have to pay for them to be wrapped and wait while they're wrapped on, obviously.
Yeah. Or whether they just like brought some boxes along just for the filming. I suspect it's probably that. Because I don't know who these people are. There's no explanation about what relationship they have to the production team or anything. I really don't know. So yeah, they come back and all the kids come out, sort of wade through the mud to get the presents. Doesn't one of them drop something in the mud?
I think so. You have to pick it up again, yeah.
So we're back in studio. So Brian and the toys, who are apparently excited, but I can't tell.
No, they don't look excited.
From their usual expressions, doing some rapping. Who's the best toy?
It's either got to be Big Ted or Little Ted, or possibly Humpty.
You're not so keen on the dolls,
no,
are you?
Hamble just looks really scary, and her face is filthy.
Yeah, Hamble's face. I think they've taken her on location to the farm because she wanted to go, and somebody's dropped her in the cow shite. Because it is what their cheek. I mean, they've turned it away from camera, but you know, give the poor thing a wash for God's
wash
sake.
your face.
Get your flannel out or something. You know, Brian, spit on her with your hanky or something. But my God, yeah, Jemima's been on the sherry because she nearly falls over at one point.
But ragdolls never sit up.
But yeah, I just wrote Hamble Scabby. But yeah, isn't it grand? It's half a day till Christmas is the next song. There's a lot of singing in this.
There
it has to be
is a lot of
said.
singing, yes.
Eventually, the toys end up in the cupboard.
Yep.
Don't know what they get up to in there.
They go to sleep.
Do they? All right, okay. I imagine them like sort of having parties at night, and keeping everybody up. The advice they give you is the earlier you go to sleep, the sooner tomorrow will come, which is not, as you said, not an excuse to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
How early did you used to get up?
Quite early. Get told go back to bed.
Yeah, it's not
Too early yet.
It's not ready yet.
It's not been yet.
But yeah, we'll see you tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
Because there is an episode on Christmas Day. Amazing. And don't forget to hang up your Christmas stocking.
I never had a Christmas stocking.
Did you not?
No.
Did you have a sack?
Might have had a pillowcase, but
What, a spare one?
probably. I can't remember.
Or did you have to go without a pillow that night?
No, it would have been a spare one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never got like nuts and things like that, nuts and tangerines
Nuts and
things.
may.
So
Did you used to get a selection box or anything?
Yeah.
Chocolate.
Chocolate and sort of annuals.
Because
and
we've
things
got
like that.
an advent calendar which is Haribo this year.
We haven't opened it yet.
I'm fed up with horrible
Advent coloured
chocolate.
Well, that's because you don't buy decent chocolate.
All right. Should point out we're recording this on the first day of Christmas. Well, it's not the first day of Christmas. It's the 1st of December.
Yes.
Yes.
Christmas is still a few weeks away.
Yeah. But I'm overexcited already.
Oh God.
Yeah, like Jemima. So the end credits roll. And scripted and directed by Anne Goby, series producer Cynthia Felgate, and produced by Peter Ridsdale Scott of Emu fame. He's done a lot of good work.
Yes.
So there we are. There's Christmas Eve with Play School. And would you have been excited as a kid if you were like 5 watching this?
Well, yeah. I would point out I wasn't actually born in 1970.
You were not born, and I was 2.
So yes.
So I'm not sure I would have seen it.
No, but yeah, I would have been excited by Christmas Eve when I was 5.
Yeah. And would you have gone to bed early?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
I don't know. Yeah, my only tale, and I might have told this before, is that one Christmas Eve we were driving home and we saw a light on the horizon. My parents told me that was Father Christmas. He was coming round and he was visiting the farms, locally already. When we got home, I rushed up to bed and didn't have a story that night. Normally I'd have to have a story, but because I'd saw Father Christmas in his light on the horizon, he must have been really close. So I had to screw my eyes up and pretend I was asleep, just in case.
Aww.
So there you go. There's Play School. We'll be back again later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for helping with that, Lisa.
That's all right. Thank you for helping, Andrew.
You were saying about the 12 Days of Christmas, weren't you?
I was, because I seem to have heard this song an awful lot since the recording of the article.
Yeah.
Because we've got Christmas music at work. And every time it gets to "And a Partridge in a Pear Tree," I think of Alan Partridge in his Christmas special. Because he's "And a partridge in a pear tree, that's me."
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. That's me.
Right, coming up next, we've got Martin talking about Christmas in general.
Yes.
And Ben Baker, who may just have a new book out.
Ooh.
So we'll run those together.
Yes.
But before we do that,
Yes.
I want to get back to your difficult nuts, Lisa.
Right.
Because you couldn't quite work out what they were.
No.
So they weren't almonds, were they?
No.
No. And so what are they, acorns?
I'm not Piglet.
Oh, well, what do you think they are then?
I think they're just Brazils.
Pain's just Brazils. The most Brazils of all. You give them a another.
As it's the season for festive thoughts, fun, frolics, loud jumpers, reindeer and jolly fat men blocking your flu, I've been giving some thought to the small matter of the Christmassy television that I remember from when I was younger, and, as ever, with this old roomy-eyed viewer, it's never quite as straightforward a question as you might think. We are living in very peculiar times, of course, where one of the great traditions is for families to gather around a glowing screen, these days not necessarily the same glowing screen, of course, and consume the very best, it says here, that our broadcasters have to offer us, when it comes to Christmas telly. Or do they? Is it not often simply a matter of churning out the same old tat, albeit with the odd sprig of holly or ratty bit of tinsel sellotaped to the fridge, and an extra 10 minutes of dialogue that would never have made a standard cut just to persuade us all that we're watching a festive special? Sometimes a new definition of the word special that we hadn't previously come across. Familiar characters suddenly wearing pullovers and headgear that they would never countenance in any other episode, and discovering long-lost relatives that they can sentimentalise over before never bothering to see them again. Or heading off on some quite out-of-character holiday to an exotic location simply because they've been given more money in the budget to play with, and the production team fancy a bit of a break from filming in the cold and the wet of the home counties. Because, you know, they film all of these things in June, don't you? Miss Marple, you know I'm looking at you. Oh, don't give me that but it's in the book nonsense, missy. Considering how some viewers apparently still assume that some of the shows are real and are happening right now, perhaps the they film it in June thing does come as something of a surprise to many. Not our discerning listeners, of course, but definitely some. The extended Christmas special has a long tradition on British television and, like the trapped lemmings we are, we fall for it every time. Even if the programmes themselves are often not the very best that the series might have to offer us, they can end up being the most watched episodes of the show and possibly give viewers who'd normally cross motorways to avoid them a chance to see just what all the fuss is about. After all, it's usually the most popular series that get the festive special pride of place in the schedule slots. And the rest of television sometimes has to hang around till well beyond Boxing Day to give us their, now suddenly slightly stale-seeming vision of the Christmas experience, or even quite often last year's version, because there wasn't room amidst those heavy hitters for their offering. And so, predictably, midwives are called, abbeys are downtoned, and boys are Mrs. Browned, immediately confirming their status as the most loved and most watched, even if some of us are now on the opposite hard shoulder, wondering quite how to clamber up the embankment and find something else to watch. Christmas often begins with the ritual of going through the year's squeaky new television magazine of choice and circling it with Vandal's pens in order to pick out the highlights. In recent years, this has often been accompanied with the brand new ritual of bellowing, "There's really nothing worth watching. I don't know why we bother buying this thing," although maybe that's just me. Certainly those now significant book-priced copies have often remained unmarked at Holmes Towers in recent Christmas seasons, although the Christmas RT does still get added to the pile of others that I've hung on to since 1975. This means that Christmas has become the season when those slowly rotting shiny discs are taken down off the shelf and dusted down, and we start making up our own schedules. Or when, if you're lucky enough, that shiny new box set is taken out of the cellophane and devoured almost as voraciously as that carcass of roast beast was just a few short hours earlier. But it wasn't always this way. Before the coming of the multi-channel, multi-platform, everyone watched for themselves televisual landscape, there was Christmas telly, and Christmas telly was often watched with an entire extended family gathered round one glowing cathode ray tube, nattering away and hardly hearing a word, whilst drowning out the best jokes with a round of "Shush, I'm trying to hear," because you really wanted to share the best collective moments once you went back to work or school next week. Considering how telly-obsessed I became over the years, it might be surprising to some of you just how little the telly featured in our family's festive schedule. Most years when I was growing up, we went over to my grandparents' house for Christmas Day, a relief in later years when it was only for the day itself, after a few years of being there forever over Christmas. And they pretty much had a rule of no television when you've got guests, which still makes me twitch a little when a set is switched on and I'm in somebody else's house. There was only one exception, and that was Her Madge, who would get tuned into, always on the BBC, about 5 minutes before she was due to utter that year's pronouncements, and I would get a tantalising glimpse of the annual Christmas Top of the Pops party that everyone else got to rave about, but which we could never see. Even my grandmother would emerge from kitchen duties so that all of her gravy, sausage and turkey wrangling in the kitchen would cease for the duration. I learned to block out the annual message somehow, of course, la 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 la, and in later years, until I was once again at the mercy of other people's remote controls, was able to make my excuses and avoid this ritual. Perhaps this seems ungracious of me, and maybe it is. After all, if Her Madge wanted to address us mere mortals from on high once a year, the least I could do was have a listen to what she had to say, even if most of it could have been gleaned from keeping even half an eye on the year's new output from the more sycophantic of correspondence. But it really wasn't for me. I do remember a big deal being made one year about a televised run of The Flying Scotsman, a steam train, kids, not a kilted superhero, that I watched in glorious black and white on their set in the corner of the dining room. But I'm reliably informed that this would have been a Boxing Day treat, and, because it would have been something my grandfather really wanted to see, a perfectly acceptable way to pass some time, despite their guests. Anyway, on any year when our visit didn't extend beyond the great day itself, once crackers were pulled and washing had been upped, it was just a question of waiting for that terrifying journey homewards, perched upon my unseat-belted grandmother's knee, and the endless round of farewells before we'd be back in our own living room, and finally, the telly could be switched on and warm up, and we'd get our evening of Mike Yarwood or Morecambe and Wise. And yes, I do remember us sitting there watching that record-breaking Morecambe and Wise show, and yes, as a family we did sit there and howl with laughter all together. Later years would bring huge changes, of course, brought on by ageing and ill health, and so the locations and the numbers of people around would change, but this attitude towards the evils of distracting screens did not. And so it wasn't until much later that I could have control of my own Christmas Day viewing, and by then, of course, my own choices were already starting to deviate slightly from what was the national fare of choice. Also by then, of course, there'd been the coming of the mighty VHS machine into all our lives, and, like many similarly minded folk, one of the great joys of Christmas was the ritual buying of the multi-packs of blank tapes as you went round the supermarket grabbing all those mince pies and sausage rolls and what have you that the Christmas season demands that you simply cannot live without, and Christmas will be totally ruined if you reach out to your hand and somehow fail to find your every culinary desire within an arm's reach. Back then, of course, there was plenty worth taping. Yours to own forever on videotape. Forever here being defined as just as long as this format is the most current and players are widely available and the tape doesn't start to rot. Let's say about 10 years. And so, the tapes would fill up with big exciting movies that I'd mostly buy later on DVD, and strange New Year's Eve's programmes that I'd watch with a hangover and probably never actually see again despite refusing to tape over them. Clive James on, whatever year it was. And unmissable Christmas viewing of things like Only Fools and Horses that I would find amazing, but somehow never quite get around to actually bothering to watch again. So what of the Christmas special episode in the modern era? Certainly, as mainstream terrestrial broadcasting diminishes in its impact, the Christmas special episode has kind of lost its impact, even if they're still being made and grabbing those headlines. But there is a certain weirdness in the age of the binge watch where the schedule's Christmas episode will suddenly pop up even if you're working your way through a series at the height of summer. And to be honest with you, I can never quite get the hang of watching all of the fake snow, multitudinous Santa Claus outfits being worn and sweet saccharine sentimentality being spouted by otherwise hardened cynical detective types just because it's Christmas at any other time of the year other than Christmas. Mind you, I might be the exception. At the time of writing, very early in November, already the news is telling us about families who've put their decorations up in order to have a bit of joy in their bleak lives as we dive into another lockdown, and whilst I might roll my eyes at the ridiculousness of that, you can sort of understand it, even if you wonder whether they'll be utterly sick of them by the time the big day itself rolls round. And do not get me started on adults bleating on about the number of sleeps to go. Honestly, the infantilization of society and breathe. Interestingly, I do have a kind of strange fascination with the American TV idea of a Christmas episode of any and all of their long-running series. Quite often you would only know it because there are a few decorations scattered round in otherwise drab and dreary offices that normally do all they can to uphold the myth of the corporate dream. And that's fair enough, I suppose. After all, in a workplace-driven society, a lot of people's experience of the festive season is basically much the same as every other time of the year, but with added bits of shrubbery, tinsel and twinkly lights, perhaps with the odd dash of alarming headgear and other clothing choices, and perhaps the odd night knocking back too much alcohol in a bar you'd normally never go to with people you'd rather not be forced to spend any more time with than you absolutely have to. But work life in Tellyland is very different. Not least because a telly Christmas is really the idea of an ideal sentimentalised American Christmas with lots of stuff being bought, and once that commercialism is out of the way, lots and lots of the sorts of values on display that seldom manage to manifest themselves otherwise throughout the rest of the year. It's not for nothing that some people really don't believe Christmas has truly begun until they've spotted the first of those heavily festooned soft drinks lorries belting round the countryside in those adverts. Holidays are coming, holidays are coming. Mind you, we've got in on that particular act in recent years too, with a lot of people and newspapers giving far too much of their time and energy in analysing the latest round of expensive seasonal supermarket adverts which seem to get more attention than the actual programmes these days. Meanwhile, Back in those TV dramas, I've lost track of the number of times that otherwise hard-bitten cynics, who are usually quite respectable really, suddenly display an uncharacteristic softer side and, God help us, crack a smile or shed an artistic tear just because of some peculiar office interaction or event that would otherwise have them growling into their disposable coffee cup. I'm looking at you, Agent Gibbs. I've also lost track of the number of abandoned or lost babies that somehow trigger an allegory of the nativity scene before being miraculously reunited with someone or other, the sudden miracle of the money to instantly resolve far more long-standing problems, or the wailing of a mournful melodious retake on a Christmas classic, haunting the soundtrack just to cause a lump in the throat, or for grown adults to suddenly find that they have something in their eye. So often there is bonding where before there was none, and the sacred holy notion of the American family, mom and apple pie, even a workplace family where everybody on the credits really has nowhere better to be on Christmas Eve, gets a leg up, even amongst the most dedicated professionals for whom normally neither snow, nor sleet, nor hail, nor character actor in a red suit and unconvincing beard would prevent them from doing their jobs. And then there are the orphans. Oh, it's the bloody orphans, or the sudden unexpected reunions, or that moment when, despite nobody having a free moment, a cast member will cross continents on suddenly available flights to be with the people it was impossible to be with not 30 minutes earlier, or despite all of the shops being closed, beautifully wrapped gifts magically appear. Of course, like almost everybody, I'm an absolute sucker for this stuff, and yet I still have my favourites, even if, in these oh-so-busy times, it's getting increasingly difficult to find the time to sit down and watch those old favourites, like Too Many Christmas Trees, The Blue Carbuncle, and those Baz and Nige Sherlock Holmes films that just seem so very appropriate when the fire is lit and it's cold and dark outside. And there's rarely time amongst all the Grinches and Arthur Christmases and Fred Clauses and Wonderful Lives that simply have to be watched to settle down with my personal favourite adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, featuring Patrick Stewart in the role of Ebenezer Scrooge. That one seasonal tale bound to melt the hardest of hearts, even though I do have a soft spot for pre-transformation Scrooge, as I've said before, and which has possibly inspired, alongside that trip to Potterville via Bedford Falls, more Christmas TV episodes of things than any other Christmas story. Speaking of which, if I'm lucky and I have 3/4 of an hour to spare, I might just cram in Blackadder's Christmas Carol, but despite its excellent pedigree and the fact that I do love it so, it's just not the same thing at all. Strangely, the best Christmas ever, and yes, for about the first 10 years I was utterly addicted to EastEnders, shudder. The best Christmas ever was actually one of the two I spent alone in my little flat after the great breakup of '92 and the years my mother chose to spend away from home with her grandchildren and my sister, far too far away for me to be bothered driving down there once work packed up for the festive season. Honestly, cooking yourself a huge Christmas dinner with all of the trimmings whilst nursing the hangover you got after entertaining a few folk with a dinner party on Christmas Eve is highly recommended. But it was the fact that I could choose my own telly that made it special. You see, that was the year that BBC2 put its 3-part arena documentary on Orson Welles on TV on Christmas morning, and so all of the washing up and all of the food preparation was done in the company of a great documentary about a great filmmaker, without anybody at all kicking off about how dull it was, or that I needed to be somewhere else, or doing something else, or simply nattering away throughout it whilst I was trying to listen, and despite the otherwise probably quite bleak-looking appearance of my life back then, that remains a glorious shining memory. Sad? Moi? No, not really. But, like for many, my own Christmases have changed from what they were back then. For many years I was far too busy to be watching TV, as there were logistical reasons to be dashing about all over the place for the bulk of Christmas Day, and so much of the day itself would often involve parking my mum in front of an episode of Inspector Morse that she'd missed, whilst I tried to light the fire, make her coffee and create our lunch, and in later years still it was often late in the evening before I'd be back home with my own dear beloved and play the annual guessing game of whether the DVR had actually bothered recording that year's Doctor Who Christmas special. Things change. We hang on to these small traditions as if they're carved out of stone, even if they're only traditions because we did them once before and that was only last year. And for a great many of us, this year is going to be so different because of our own personal situation, and I hardly imagine that, given the national and international situation, much of what might have been expected to fill our screens might not be there, and for once even the broadcasters might be ferreting around trying to find things to entertain the masses as our digestive systems wheeze and groan with the excesses of the day. But there's always something on, even if it's last year's something. And if you haven't got heartily sick of the festive films that have been available on all those streaming platforms of choice since Halloween night, maybe this is the year that people will rediscover the simple delights of conversation, gathering round the old pianola to have a jaunty, if Inspector Japp alarming sing-along, or perhaps just enjoy spending time in each other's company. Now, they'll put the telly on like always. After all, there's always something worth watching at Christmas time, isn't there? If not, do like we do and grab the DVDs from an era when there was. Happy Christmas.
And now we go live to Keighley for Ben Baker's now traditional festive shilling of his latest Christmas TV book. Cue the music.
What? No. Cut the music. Cut the music. I'm not doing one this year. I'm not. Look. After writing last year's Christmas Was Better in the 80s, I'd convinced myself that I'd absolutely exhausted the topic of festive telly. I mean, sure, there was plenty to talk about from the 70s, but my lack of being born in that decade might prove a hindrance on the whole personal context front. As for the 90s, a decade where I was rarely far away from a blaring convex screen, there didn't really seem to be much of a story to talk about, outside everything becoming more rubbish. I mean, you'd have to be some sort of idiot to try and write a book about that. Excuse me a second. Hello, yes? 2020 a massive disaster, you say? Everyone confined to their homes? And looking for any distraction from their awful, awful lives? One moment, please. So, as I was saying, my new book, I Was Bored on Christmas Day, 90s Christmas Telly from Ant and Dec to Zig and Zag, is out now. In it, I tell the story of the 90s through the TV we watched and the people who made it. It's my kiss under the mistletoe with the shows that defined a nation, and a cheeky fumble with the things that fell through the cracks. It was an era where we said, "Eh-oh" to the Teletubbies, and goodbye to the Trotters. Noel Edmonds was bleeding everywhere, and people nervously waited out the millennium and the end of times it would inevitably bring.
Bleep bloop, now I explode!
This was the 90s, and it feels like it only happened 2 minutes ago, and yet simultaneously an entire lifetime ago. The decade was a weird middle ground where mobile phones, the internet and DVDs were becoming an affordable reality, yet existed in a world where bamboozle on teletext, the fun facts, and VHS cassette labels marked in red ink, "Mum's tape, soldier, soldier, do not touch," were still a regular sight in many homes. Where forgotten stars in day-glow clothing could stand less than 2 feet from an audience and cough openly into their faces without so much as a vaguely written warning statement on some green and yellow signage. Programmes like Bad Influence and The Net used to tease an astonishing technological future, whilst Saturday Night Live, Manhattan Cable and the United States of Television with the wonderful Laura Keitlinger opened the stained velvet curtains to a wider world of telly. All of it cheap, invariably bonkers, and /or featuring a parade of nude bums. Arbiters of taste and culture railed against these changes and warned that more television would actually be a bad thing for us, and that these new companies wouldn't be able to sustain the quality of the traditional terrestrial channels. As if. At the start of the 90s, terrestrial telly was where all the actually good stuff lived, with no shortage of drama, comedy, quiz, and entertainment formats to drag in the viewers. Even if it did mean you might end up seeing dueling David Jasons on several channels at once. As I entered my pre-teens, BBC Two and Channel 4 were rich playgrounds of interesting ideas, new faces, challenging concepts, and comedy that felt totally different to anything that came before. Much of it influenced by the speed at which the decade was hurtling on. And yet, along the way, something went wrong. Maybe it was the all-encompassing millennium on the horizon, or the uncertain times that came with the expensive switch to digital television, and its initial audience that could fit in a mini metro with plenty of legroom to spare. Others might blame the deregulation, which meant households no longer had to buy both the radio and TV times, leading to a rise of cheapo, no-frills magazines like What's on TV, TV Quick,
TV right bleeding fast, TV, too late you just missed it, and TV much slower now after the pills doctor, flooding the newsagent's shelves. For some it went wrong when some devious bidding wars designed by the outgoing Thatcher government meant the loss of many favourite ITV regions as December 92 became January 93, with TVS losing to Meridian, TSW to West Country, TVM to GMTV, and perhaps the biggest shock of all, Thames Television being outbid by 10 million from the deep pockets of Carlton Television, who would use this as a base to expand into all other ITV stations they could get their mitts on, creating an amorphous blob that is the current ITV plc. The IBA was abolished and replaced with a less strict ITC, and suddenly it became about how much money you had, not the quality of programming. Executives realised that it was cheaper to point a camera at members of the public rather than take a risk on untested new programming. BBC Two and Channel 4 became obsessed with a food, property market and renovation culture that to this day still dominates their schedules, whilst BBC One and ITV seem to struggle to find new plans for the next Only Fools and Horses or Inspector Morse, and even the few new hits of the time were soon besieged by copycat programmes, often on the same channel. And for many it was when Channel 5... just Channel 5 really. I've tried to cover all this and much more in my new book, which is equally full of interesting facts and very stupid jokes. Programmes featured include The Generation Game, Bernard and the Genie, Des O'Connor Tonight, Stella Street, Teletubbies, Newman and Baddiel Christmas in Pieces, The Ghosts of Oxford Street, Maid Marian and Her Merry Men, TFI Friday, Men Behaving Badly, Aunties Bloomers, 2.4 Children, Stars in Their Eyes, Light Lunch, Dinner Ladies, Beavis and Butthead, Father Ted, Gladiators, The Flint Street Nativity, and The Wizard of Oz on Ice. No, really. Plus there's star names in there like Take That, Madonna, Harry Hill, Quentin Crisp, Lenny Henry, Mrs. Merton, Willie Carson, Adam and Joe, Johnny Vegas, Rory Bremner, Ed the Bleeding Duck, Mr. Blobby, Lulu, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Parky, and the Spice Girls. And yet, despite all that's changed, we still come together at Christmas. Granted, in 2020 it might be via one of those big bubble things like John Travolta wore in that film, or shouting to Uncle Pat that he's on mute every 3 minutes, but nevertheless, the seasonal period remains the one time a year everyone still tries to make the effort and spends time with the people they love. And if this year it means being able to watch the box without an elderly relative muttering every 10 minutes, "Telly was better in my day," "Bring back the Del Boy," or "When's Hardwick House on?" then, well, so be it. Has all this got you feeling nostalgic? Good. Let's escape the present together, shall we? Your pal, Ben Baker, 37 feet below sea base, Uptown. Mum, pass the Global Hypercolour t-shirt and the twist and squeeze, will ya?
Bleep bloop. Did somebody say explosions, please?
Thank you again to Martin and to Ben.
Yes, thank you, boys.
They've both been very busy.
They have.
As they've got lots of stuff out for Christmas.
They have.
Ben, of course, on Don't Let's Chart, as
Yes.
well as his book.
Mm-hmm.
And Martin on an A to Z of UK TV drama. And
Vision on Sound.
all of which, well worth investigating.
Oh, yes, indeed.
And now Paul and Nick arrive to talk about, well, let's just say their surprise Christmas presents.
Hello, Round the Archives people. It's me, Paul the Shy Yeti. How you doing? I'm back again, and I've got Nick Goodman with me.
Hello.
Hello. This is our little article for the December 2020 edition of Round the Archives. Well, the listeners...
Because it's Christmas!
Yes, and I thought it would be quite fun if we sort of
did an article where we kind of gave each other a gift, as it were, in that we are going to talk about two different TV shows that are sort of this period of the year, sort of festive. I don't know what you're going to talk about, and you don't know what I'm going to talk about. But
indeed, that's all fun, isn't it? So it's a case of unwrapping it.
Yes, yeah.
I just hope you won't be disappointed.
I'm sure I won't.
I've tried to go for something a little bit different and obscure.
Yeah, I think
not something that we talk about every all the time.
Yeah, I think. I've done the same thing. So, well, would you like to go first?
Yes. Now, I thought long and hard about this, and there was a few things that went by the wayside. But my choice for Christmas viewing, as it were, for this article is EBC1. That is Emus Broadcasting Company, the 1970s programme vehicle for Rod Hull and Emu. And this was the one they did for the Beeb. I'm not quite sure how many series they did for the Beeb, but this was from 75. It says 75 to 80, but I don't remember the last season at all.
I like it when it's Christmas time, don't you?
I was a fan of it at the time. It was a fun show. Rod Hull and Emu were kind of a bit like Marmite, you know. There's so many people, even from my generation, that sort of some equal amount seem to love them and loathe them. So the other, it's only really when I sat down and watched this episode this week do I really, I kind of defined my own sort of feelings about them. I think I do like them, and I always have. I would not argue with anyone who didn't like them, because I can see why they're not liked. And also, I wouldn't really give an argument to anyone who said that they were a one-joke wonder, because they are. But this is me giving a little bit of background to start with. But I feel that what sells it is the fact that Rod Hull is such a sort of comedically hapless, a very man, and very physical comedy. He's a very good physical comedian, and he sells the whole calamity of Emu quite so well. And I think a bit like Vic and Bob. I like them, but they need to be in the right vehicle. I think later on, and maybe a little bit before, the vehicles for Emu were inappropriately twee. The Pink Minwheel always seemed to be a bit aimed too much at kids, considering how dark Emu is, he attacks people. If you see him on the Michael Parkinson show attacking people, and then we're supposed to accept this sort of fantasy world where he's the hero and it's all very gooey-eyed. Actually there's a tonal, there's a world of difference between that in tones, and I don't think that the creation is quite that flexible. However, EBC1 was something I very much kind of revelled in when it came out, because I'd always had a fantasy of creating my own TV channel that I had power over, and of course this was my ongoing fantasy when I was a kid, which created the Magnet Editor, the Mr. Payne series, all the sort of fake programs I had, which came to life in the playground. And this was that fantasy come true, because the joke was it was very much a tin pot setup. You had Rod Hull being the helmsman, of course, and Emu kind of messing around with the controls. You had Billy Dainty, the very talented Billy Dainty, as the straight man who played the mechanic or the engineer, and Barbara New, as I say, two great troopers. who was the Betty the Tea Lady, and between them they all played all the parts in all the TV shows that were there. And I can't help the other thing that it reminded me of when I watched it was Sutton Park, with your own kind of. And especially when Rod Hull sort of turns to the camera at the beginning, going, "I feel it," kind of like a sort of squeaky version of yourself. And this whole Tin Pot kind of, sort of, this is the, being scared of it's like Tin Pot monsters, or and the same people playing the same part. It's like Billy Dainty sort of plays. Is very much a Lee Freeman character in it, because he has all these different disguises and things like that. And again, marvellous physical comedian. And this is a Christmas, unsurprisingly, this is the Christmas 1976 edition. I think it went out on the 17th of December. I think I did a little bit of research. And it's got a link up to supposedly the rest of the world. But it's just the other side of the studio with Billy Dainty and Barbara New dressing up in different costumes for the countries, and they're trying to find Australia for Emu, and they keep not being able to find Australia for Emu, and there's various sort of things along the way. All throughout the series, they parodied existing teleprograms, which is another nice nod to the slightly older viewers, because they can see the satires, and there's one of Angels, there's one of the Bionic Man, and there's of course the most famous one, which is probably more famous than EBC1, is Dr. Emu, which is the following season. Yeah. There's a Frankenstein send up, there's a Sherlock Holmes send up, and all of which is fun. But there's also, with this one, a bit where they zoom in on, they get some guest speaker. One of which is they look down this kind of gramophone, and there's various people, CSO, coming through leaving messages. There's one of Dick Emery. He just says, "And a Merry Christmas to the rest of you," which looks like it was cribbed off a BBC trailer of some description. Yeah. But there is actually a purpose-built one by John Inman, who materialises and tells Emu a joke, which Rod seems to be very shocked by. And
oh, look, there's a picture coming.
Oh, hello. Do you know, I've just been watching you. What are you doing here?
Well, we were trying to get somebody on the electric backwards, you see, John, and... can you tell Evie a joke or something? Cheer him up, because he always laughs at you. He's a bit depressed at the moment.
Emu, here's a funny joke. There's two little boys in school, you see, and one of them puts his hand up and says, "Excuse me, miss, may I go to the loo?" And she says, "Certainly not. You stay behind afterwards and fill up the ink wells."
Oh! And it's a jolly, they all have a party at the end, and there's a great song at the end, which is rather fun. And it's got that, going back, I was my first year in junior school at the time, and it's got the sort of tone of that party. It's very much kind of junior school, primary school party. It feels right. And it feels nice. It brought a smile to my face seeing it all again. Yeah. And because I definitely saw it when it first televised, because I remember there's a bit where Billy Dainty dresses up as Father Christmas, and for this season there's what we call the baby emus, which quite how biologically that figures with emu I don't know, but there are a lot of baby puppets, kind of, and it just gives them an excuse to attack Billy Dainty and give Rod something else to do. And then he dresses up as Father Christmas and pretends to kind of attack them, and then they put some mistletoe up, and he, "Oh, they want to kiss me," and then they kind of grab him and pull him in.
She's always brewing
tea for the EBC. I stop whatever I'm doing
to make tea for the EBC.
I make it in the morning and in the afternoon. I like to make it strong enough to melt a plastic spoon. 'Cause I'm always brewing
tea for the EBC. Whether it's cold or whether it's hot, as long as you put him above the pot.
tea for the EBC.
You pour for me, I'll pour for you. Stir in the milk. Is it 1 lump or 2?
Tea for the EBC. I have to use the skewer. The spout it always blocks. When I run out Uncle Albert's socks, 'cause I'm always
It tastes like it as well. Uncle Albert's socks. What are you doing now?
So I was going to say, I feel like I must have seen some of this era, or maybe later than 76. But I know that I must have liked it enough that I was embarrassed by the 80s Pink Windmill stuff. I mean, I was older anyway, but I knew enough to know that this isn't what Emu used to be like, and this is a bit of a shame. Also, there was a boy at school who used to have an emu toy, and he used to go around pecking people and throwing the going pecky wecky emu and throwing it up on the school roof. And I think eventually the headmistress said to him, "If you do that again, that the emu's staying there."
I had an emu too, actually. I've got the toy emu from about the same time. And indeed, Andrew Trowbridge, who our leader, as it were, from I remember him bringing one round and including it in some part. He played the bagpipes.
Yes, I remember that.
But I definitely remember that bit with Billy Dainty and the baby emus. The other noting thing for this season was there is Disco Duck played constantly in the background. Which of course would have been in the charts when about the time it had started, and it's just nice to see everybody dress up and have fun and play all these different characters, and I enjoyed seeing it. Yes. And I mean, you've even got a sort of joke about, they show bits of the world and said, I looked at this Hudson's Bay, and there's a joke about Hudson, the butler in Upstairs Downstairs, and I thought, I think that is definitely one aimed at the grown-ups, because although I knew Upstairs Downstairs, I'm not quite sure I would have kind of been au fait with the characters enough to know who Hudson was.
That was Hudson's Bay. Look, there's Hudson's Bay up there in the Dominion of Canada. All of that's Hudson's Bay. How Hudson could afford to buy that on his wages as a butler, I'll never know.
But no, it's good fun, and it made me realise they were an oddity. They were sort of antisocial. They would have had an ASBO if they were around today. But I did actually like, given the right vehicle, like you said, Pink Windmill was a bit crap. I mean, I no disrespect to Carolee Scott, who played Grotbags, who I thought was a great character, but the script was a bit twee, and it wasn't really what Emu should have been about.
There was sort of all the stage school brats as well, wasn't it?
Oh, weren't they other? There's somebody at the door and all that. I mean, the thing is, there's a few kids brought in, but they're all sort of guesting on the monitor and saying a joke, and then they're gone. And the rest of the show is done by the grown-ups.
I suppose the Pink Windmill stuff was very stagey, wasn't it? It was like if it was a pantomime, you wouldn't think twice, but it was just on TV. It wasn't. I tend to think of Emu as being more akin to something like a kid's version of Kenny Everett or something, sort of wacky and off the wall.
Feathered Kenny Everett. Yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, he was quite a dark sort of thing, because there's very obviously the Parkinson thing most famous. And I still chuckle at Billy Connolly's comment. If he comes anywhere near me, I'll break his neck and your arm. I
think Emu on Parkinson or Emu on adult shows worked in a way that when they sort of dragged Orville onto sort of that just kind of felt inappropriate or kind of a bit creepy, whereas Emu, because I think it was the voice, doing the voice and everything, and the innocent thing, whereas Emu was never innocent, and he doesn't have a voice to sort of, he is a physical comedian.
Exactly. It's looking at it again, I thought Andrew Rodhall was a very, very good comedy actor. I know he was a bit bitter because the Emu thing was so successful. Nobody was interested in seeing him on his own. And I suppose it did free him up to do. There's a few sort of characters he plays where he hasn't got emu, but if you saw him on stage, without emu, you think, blimey, what's he going to do with his arm? And there's a few other things. They had a regular feature on EBC1 called The Searching Beak of Emu, where they have a filmed bit where they go around to various the schools and factories and things like that, and they sort of do that bit. And I was very keen on the music for that because it was very, as you know, I like my sort of obscure 70s music with that came on programmes or was a test card or whatever. I've got CDs and CDs of it, and it had a very groovy 70s theme with one of those right at the end, one of those wee 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 kind of I don't know what it's called apart from a wee wee wee, and it's like Tina Turner's Nutbridge High School or whatever it's called, with the wee wee wee, and that sort of ends with the wee wee wee. So that's great, and he still makes me smile. I must admit that, and that's the main thing. I was thinking, I like the series, but are certain bits going to kind of make me cringe? But I didn't really cringe at all. It was. I have to say again, Billy Dainty and Barbara New are fabulous old troopers. Billy Dainty sadly died in 1986 at the age of 50-something because his heart attack. I think he was one of the, again, like Leonard Rossiter and someone like Harry H. Corbett. I think they were workaholics. They kind of, that generation kind of burnt themselves out a bit because they just worked too hard. And he did panto and he did loads and loads of stuff. And Barbara New was still knocking around in the early noughties because she was in the Ali G movie as Ali's gran. So and the other thing, of course, is I'm not the first person to have said this, but there is a sad irony in the fact that one of the regular features of EBC1 is Rod going onto the roof to look at the weather, which of course we've got here, where the weather altogether, what's going to do and all that. And there is an exchange in this one where Billy Dainty's going up a ladder and he said, look, I'll go up the ladder and you go up on the roof and look at the weather. And it could, and Rod's saying, hang about, why am I doing that? And he goes, because you've got no head for height. And of course when you think about the poor fella fell off the roof and to his death, and you kind of think, no, don't do that. And so although but it's comedy banter, there's a sad irony to it that such a sort of calamitously comical, physically comical man actually had a physically calamitous death.
Weather all together, what's it gonna do? We don't know, and so let's ask Weatherman Emu.
It's snowing. I tell you what, I'll sort it all out. I'll go up the ladder and attend to my cable, and you go up on the roof.
Yeah. Hey, just a minute, I'm doing the broadcasting. Why can't I go up the ladder and look at the cables and you go on the roof?
Because you have no head for heights. Just leave it to me, go up on the roof and leave everything to me.
Yeah, I wonder where he would have gone had he lived. I don't know, but I don't think he had the best of luck sometimes with some of the directions his career went. So maybe he was still looking for I'm glad EBC1 hung around for about 4 or 5 years because it was a good show. It was fun. It was well written. And it's nice to be able to see it again. But just trying to think of any other things that I mean, there was one episode I remember. I've not seen it since, but simple verbal humour that really was quite nice. They said they did Open Emu-versity. And they had Rod and Emu dressed in sort of mortarboards and things. And they said, today we're going to teach you how how to make a bonfire out of doors. And there's this pile of doors. I've not rewatched that one, but that's good fun. But there you go, EBC1, December 1976, and nicely done, and it made me smile.
That's a good present. Thank you very much. Well, mine's a bit different. It's probably one of the most recent. Well, the particular episode is probably one of the most recent that we've ever done on Round the Archives. It comes from Christmas 2018.
Blimey. That's only 2 years ago, folks.
Yes, but the show itself is 35 years old, or has been going for 35 years. So it does fall into a current series, and yet a series that's been running for a very long time. And I'm picking the Christmas 2018 episode of Neighbours. Now, as you did before, I'll give you a little bit of a background. Yes. I mean, like lots of people did, I watched it when I was at school because it goes back to the sort of the late 80s, and when all the kids my age were watching it. So I watched all the way through the sort of Kylie and Jason era, and all the people like Guy Pearce and who went on to be famous. But when I got to university, I didn't have very good TV reception. So we're talking about 92, probably when I started to drift from it. But I think for a long time we were 18 months behind. So when we talk about Neighbours in the UK and we talk about it in Australia, there's quite a serious sort of misalignment.
Hello Round the Archives listeners, it's me, Cuthbert. I am Paul the Shy Yeti's trusty robot friend, and he has asked me to add a little note at this point in the article. Paul says that, although we used to be 18 months behind on Neighbours in the 80s and 90s, by the 2010s we were airing episodes on the same day as they are aired in Australia. That only changed earlier this year due to the COVID pandemic, when Channel 5 got scared that they might run out of episodes and delayed broadcast. However, Neighbours kept on filming and Australia kept on screening episodes, so the UK is now 3 to 4 weeks behind. Something that is making UK Neighbours fans pretty cross, because the networks between UK and Australian fan groups rely on being at the same point in the show for their jolly conversations. Never mind. Hey, hopefully that will all be sorted out in 2021. Anyway, it's been lovely to speak to you Round the Archives people. Let's now return to the article.
I guess it's partly why it was so popular when Kylie was in the show, because she was successful. She was also doing her music because she was 18 months ahead of what we were seeing. So she was known for the TV, but her music career was already starting.
I remember that so well when it first started.
And Jason Donovan was equally as big as her to start with.
He certainly was.
Yeah, I mean, he still does musicals and things. So it was definitely a good sort of starting point for him. But anyway, so I didn't watch for many years. I think in the noughties, maybe it happened to be showing on UK Gold or one of those sorts of channels that I had, and it just happened to be on around breakfast time. So I did watch some of the sort of noughties episodes and saw that actually, yes, there was lots of the sort, because with soap operas, the plots I like aren't the Kylie and Jason type Scott and Charlene ones. It's the the people doing crooked deals or murders or whatever that I particularly enjoy, and I could see that actually because the character of Paul Robinson, who was in it at the start, he had left for a fair few years, but then came back in the early noughties and has been with it ever since. And he tends to be one of those characters that I so love in soaps, where you hate him one minute, but you also love him at other times, because you see he's
nicely rounded.
And there were plots involving him and planes, characters getting killed off on plane explosions, and Howard Bishop getting washed out to sea and then turning up again a few years later, having lost his memory. All those sorts of things made me think, I wish I'd seen this at the time. But then what actually brought me back to it, and I was sort of checking, it's around sort of 2012, I started to notice when one or two actresses from Prisoner, one of my other favourite Australian shows, that they were sort of doing the odd cameos. And I think I watched because one of the actresses was playing a doctor for a few weeks, so I watched then. But then one of the really important actresses, Colette Mann, who played Doreen Burns in right at the start of Prisoner, and for about 3 or 4 years, she was coming in as a regular character. And I thought, oh well, this will just be for a few months, and she's still with it, like 8 years later. So it's not the only reason I care, but you know, something like that draws you in, and then you get hooked. And the one great thing, I mean, there's been psychopaths and twin characters coming back from the dead, or you know, all sorts of the sort of soap plots that I love in this last 8 years. But the producer of the show really knows his stuff when it comes to bringing back old characters, either for guest slots or, I mean, about a year or so, I think it was when it was the 35th anniversary, they had all of Paul Robinson's wives coming back for a plot. He was about to get married to another character, his girlfriend, and all of the other wives came back together to try and persuade her not to do it. And so it was, to me, as a Doctor Who fan, it was like having all the Doctors
It was
back.
a multiple Doctor story,
Yeah, it was
Paul Robinson wife story.
And it was like, and because he's been in the show, it was people from my era. If I'm thinking about, you know, there was one of his wives, Gail. She came back, and then he was married to one of a twin, and they came back, and it was just sort of, I was in TV heaven. It was just sort of, but also characters like, there was a character called Clive who was a doctor, a very sort of quirky character. He's been back on and off for a few years now. Plain Jane Superbrain, who was one of that sort of era of Kylie and Jason, or Scott and Charlene, who was Mrs. Mangle's granddaughter. She came back to do a couple of guest slots, and as of 2020, she's actually back in the cast, as is Clive, as in the title sequence, so a proper cast member again. So all those sorts of things, you think, you know, with Doctor Who, it would be nice to have, you know, Joe Grant in it, not just for one story, but have a back, or have Ace turn up, and you know, they kind of toy with it, but they've never, if anything, they did it more with the Sarah Jane Adventures show, and had like the Brigadier turn up, stuff that would have worked just as well in the proper show, whereas Neighbours just kind of like, well, this is what we'll do.
Previously, I think we should put on a Christmas concert on Christmas night. Surprise! Mom, we can't have a concert without someone to lead the carol. Who can do it?
Hand it over. You know, you're not supposed to have tarot cards. Can't believe Dad's been gone 25 years already. You know, I never rat on your dad and Uncle.
Your informant dead.
You gonna tell Therese?
She's pretty stressed out. You know, Mannix. You got rid of him. Who left you out in the bush like this?
Paul Robinson. What do you want?
You help me with Leo, and no one finds out you're a murderer.
So with that being my background, the reason I picked this Christmas episode was, well, there's a number of actors in it that were already sort of, Jane was in it, although this was one of her guest slots before she came back. Clive was in it. Now there's a character, there's Carl and Susan. Susan they've been in the show about 25 years, and Susan's played by a former Prisoner actress. She's one of my favourites, but her sister had come in to the plot at this point, and she was played by an actress called Deborah Lawrence, who was in Prisoner, but also was, she played Pippa. I think she was the second of a generation of Pippa in Home and Away. So you've got all these lovely familiar faces. I mean, that's the good thing about Aussie shows is that A lot of the actors come back round again, but it's like, it's not like having a situation where they're on the TV all the time, where you get people, TV shows these days, you get sick of seeing the same faces all the time. This is a bit more of a rare treat, so it was nice to see them. But the actual Christmas plot, it involves you have all the Christmas concert going on, and it continues the tradition. I don't think Charlene ever did singing in Neighbours, but they have had a number of people over the years who have kind of used Neighbours as a bit of a platform for their singing, or it's been brought into the plot line. There was Natalie Imbruglia, who was in the show, but she went on to be a quite famous singer in the 90s and noughties.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know that she ever sung, but Delta Goodrum, who is a singer more from the sort of noughties, I believe that she did possibly do singing as part of her character, but because I wasn't really watching then, I might be wrong. But anyway, there is a singer in it at the moment who's playing a character, and her character does sing, and so she's sort of doing the Christmas the Christmas singing at this concert, and there's also a few nice sort of things where characters are reflecting back to other characters who have perhaps passed on quite recently.
Merry Christmas, Auntie Suze. Oh, sweetheart, same to you. Merry Christmas.
I hope those lemons aren't my present.
No, apparently they're good for vocal cords.
Oh, well, move over Mariah Carey. Do I get a hug as well? Oh, come on. Merry Christmas, darling.
With some honey, apparently they're good for stress too.
Honeybee. That could be your stage name.
So you've got all this sort of happy Christmassy thing, but then you've got this other subplot involving Paul Robinson, where I've slightly forgotten the context, but I think he can't remember whether he has killed somebody or if there's a body out in the bush somewhere, and he starts to feel guilty that he may have done something and kind of forgotten whether it was something he really did or whether he imagined it when he was unwell, and at this point Jane has come back into the show, and they're actually their characters are sort of, because they knew each other years ago, they've got a sort of possible romantic plot developing, and I think that tweaks sort of Paul's conscience. So he's been given by Jane a bauble, like a bauble you put on a Christmas tree, and she starts saying, your father Jim Robinson, he would have been so proud of you, because Jim Robinson had died 25 years before. And the actor Alan Dale had gone off to America, and he's been on all sorts of things, from Lost to Ugly Betty, and lots and lots of shows. So his sort of career in America sort of went. But obviously in the series, he died of a heart attack in about 1993. And I think with Jane's character saying this to Paul, he starts to get a prick of conscience, and. So whilst all this concert's going on, he gets in his car and he drives out to the bush. He wants to try and confirm to himself whether what he thinks happened or whether it's just him. And of course, he goes late at night, and I think something runs out in front of his car, and he bashes into a tree and hits his head. And then this is the most. I mean, at the time, I was. This was just as exciting as the Christmas Doctor Who. I think actually that year, we were only talking of it like a 25-minute episode. I think this was probably much more exciting to me than that year's Christmas special, whatever it was in
I can't even remember whether he had a Christmas special that year. Was Jodie? I think Jodie had one that year.
No, it might have been a New Year.
It was certainly more exciting than that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this was actually shown on Christmas Day, so it took the place of it might have been one of the first years they didn't have a Doctor Who on Christmas Day. They might have had it sort of, if they had it, it was later on. And so I was super excited. So he bangs his head, and then in the bauble he sees his father, the face of his father saying to him, criticising him, but also saying you need to do this. You need and Alan
critical
Dale,
bauble.
Critical bauble. I mean, it's total wonderful nonsense, and of course, I loved it.
Dad, 25 years and you still haven't learned. Oh God, Am I?
No, you're not dead.
What then? I mean, how are you here? You know, it doesn't matter. Oh, God, it's good to see you, Dad. I missed you so much.
I tried to teach you right from wrong, son. But no, you always had a mind of your own.
Oh, Dad, I know it looks bad.
You killed a man once before.
But I was sick then. I had a brain tumour.
And what's your excuse this time? Tossing your enemies into the bush? Covering your tracks?
No, I didn't do this for me, Dad. I did this for my own son, Leo. That's right, you've never met him. Or his brother, David. They're good kids. Really good kids.
And Alan Dale had come back to record these little bits
as a ball
and a face in a ball. And I think he had been to the studio because I think he's sort of still friends with Stefan Dennis, who plays Paul Robinson. So there was photos of him back on the set, and because I think he left on slightly bad terms. I think that there was sort of money problems and issues back at the time. So I don't think he left. I think it's one of those things when they sort of said, well, if you don't agree with us, we're acting your character. So I don't think he left on happiest terms. But 25 years later, it's, completely different people working on the show. And so he came. There was one little scene where you kind of see him superimposed over as well. I think Paul goes, when this scene ends, he goes and checks where this ground was to see if there is a body, and in the headlights you see, or he thinks he sees his father, and I think they've CGI'd that over. But it was partly one of those things where you sort of appreciate the fact that he came back just to do something ridiculous like that. Another similarity between Neighbours and Doctor Who, particularly the Christmas or New Year specials, is that this particular 2018 episode ends with little clues or little hints to what's coming up in the following year, in the same way as it tends to be the point, because Doctor Who Christmas specials tend to stand alone. They're not always linked. There might be a bit of a gap between the next season, or they might be a prelude to the new season, but you usually get a few clips from coming next year or coming next season. And this happened at the end of this Neighbours episode as well. You've got lots of sort of little sort of exciting bits, or an explosion, or a character, or people crying and think, oh, what's all this about? In the same way as you might with the Doctor Who episode. So all very exciting I think. Because sort of, I'm not a very Christmassy person, and Doctor Who has often in the last 15 years been the exciting thing I'm looking forward to on Christmas Day or around that time, and that was the first year it wasn't going to be on. Neighbours really filled that gap that year, and that's why I'm selecting it as my
do you think why, I mean, quite apart from the marvellous conceit of the ball, do you think a lack of Doctor Who that year was what helped draw you to the Neighbours episode?
Well, I think it was, to have a character that was dead on the show being, it makes you sort of, it's not just a character that's gone away and is coming back. It's like, okay, so how are they going to do that then? How's Jim going to turn up then? And it appeals to my sort of, okay, right.
It's up there with Home and Away. Nicole Dixon, didn't she appear in a fridge or something?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's up there with those sorts of weird ways of bringing back characters. I mean, we've still not got to the stage where we've had Kylie or Jason back on the show, although they often talk about their time. They're not embarrassed about their time. And funnily enough, Jason Donovan was back on set in the last year or so because his daughter plays Paul Robinson's granddaughter.
Oh, wow.
So he came to see her on set before COVID, and I think one day it'll happen. I mean, they both appeared. I can't remember if it was the 30th anniversary. It might have been the 30th anniversary. They both appeared on talk on the documentary talking about it, and now you've got Jane back in there. She said, Annie Jones, the actress, has said, "I'm determined to get Mike, who is Guy Pearce's character, and Scott and Charlene all back on." And now she's there on the show. It's sort of, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. Anyway, listeners, we better go. Thank you, Nick, for your choice.
My pleasure. It was a lovely thing. I thought, I must admit, when we were first proposing it, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I almost did an episode of Magpie, which I had one of these look back discs. I realised I must have given it away. But I thought, we'll do you. Yeah.
Cool. Well, hopefully we'll be back in 2021 with. We've got a few things. We should do like a like they do at the end of the Neighbours episode, like flash what's coming up in 2021. Really kind of depends on
Nick Paul.
Yes. Space 1999.
Oh yeah, this year.
Yeah. I have things I want to do. I've got a list. Okie dokie. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year.
Happy Christmas to you too, dear boy.
Yes, and to you out there in Man the Archives land.
They sent to bring you lots of talking balls.
We're going to close 1976. The way we came in here at EBC with all lots of jollies of fun, and that's it. It's Christmas, which we hope to be broadcasting once again next year.
Entertainment for Boxing Day on BBC1. At 5:15, Bob Monkhouse presents a special Christmas edition of Full House. And at 10 to 6, No Place Like Home.
Keep your hands off my Millicent.
No, the turkey.
I saw you. I was only feeding her, but then you leered at her, saying, "I wish you a Merry Christmas," and showed her a sharp knife.
Just part of the lineup for Boxing Day on BBC1.
Many thanks to Paul and Nick for that.
Yes, very interesting.
I do remember EBC1, and I think it's interesting its approach to programmes, because I think, thinking about it, Round the Archives has been slightly influenced by EBC1.
Okay. Yeah.
I did notice on some episodes that they've got a load of film and videotape canisters in the background of the set, and I do wonder what was on them.
If anything.
If anything.
Yeah.
But now, the final article. And we'll say our goodbyes at the end.
Yes.
But you and me will take a look at
No Place Like Home.
Good afternoon, Nisa.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
So our final article of this year.
Yes.
And is there no place like home?
There is no place like home, yes.
So do you remember this series?
I do remember it. It's odd because I have often commented that my family watched a lot of ITV.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure I saw this at the time.
Okay.
So,
did you actually remember the plots?
I remember, no, not individual episodes. I remember the premise
and the characters
and the fact it's got Martin Clunes in and William Gaunt. I think probably because they're both in Doctor Who as well.
Yeah.
Also, of course, you've got Dee Sadler and Daniel Hill in it as well, but more Clunes and William Gaunt, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it is a show that's really, really good for playing the connections game, isn't it? You know, because you say you've got William Gaunt of, now look, Sergeant Cork fame. But even John Watkins, the writer's got quite a few connections. I was just looking at his list, and I'd utterly forgotten that he wrote that really good episode of Shadows, the one in the railway station.
Yes.
And he did also write for the Tomorrow People.
Oh, right, okay.
And although it's not the best Tomorrow People one in the world, I'm just interested that he's got this foot mostly in comedy, but he's quite capable of writing a decent serious thing as well. I mean, we should do Shadows at some point, shouldn't we?
Yes,
so maybe we should go back to that episode next year. But yeah, Terry and June, Robin's Nest, Bless This House, Romany Jones, Don't Drink the Water.
Gosh, all the classics.
Yeah, but No Place Like Home is like his main output, I guess, because there's 42 episodes of it. Should say that IMDb is slightly confusing over which episodes are shown which, but on BritBox we managed to find 2.
Yes, they've got a whole Christmas sort of category at the moment, and the 2 so-called Christmas specials for No Place Like Home, one of which is quite Christmassy, the other which is not Christmassy at all, are listed for.
So we've got 1984. Arthur sort of wants to get away from sort of Christmas sort of spending money and all that. So he's a bit Scroogey in that one.
Yeah.
And in the 1987 one, he gets involved with a supermarket raid and becomes a bit of a hero briefly. Yeah. I did actually write quite a few notes for this, because you've got a huge cast, haven't you? It's amazing how many regulars there are on screen in some scenes. It almost feels like it's sort of doing a bit of a Dad's Army, and that it's a bit of a gang show, isn't it? Because you've got Arthur and Beryl, and a lot of the kids regenerate.
Well, one of the kids regenerates. One gets a new husband.
Yeah, because Martin Clunes is Nigel in the first 3 series, and then he turns into Andrew Charlson in 4 and 5.
Because Martin Clunes becomes bigger than the show, I guess.
But Vera regenerates from next door.
I'm not sure that's. I think I prefer the first Vera, because she's better.
Yeah, Marcia Warren. And it is quite a strange performance, Vera, because she'll come in and be a bit odd.
Yes.
I always used to like when Vera came round. That was one of the good bits. Yeah, because she's got loads of animals that you never see.
Yeah.
Because in the 1984 Christmas special, she's got a turkey, Millicent.
Yes, she won't let them kill for Christmas dinner.
And then you've got Trevor, played by TV's Michael Sharville-Martin.
Yes.
That's what you have to say, because it was always on his pantomime posters. Because he was a pantomime dame a lot.
Yes.
And I've seen some very good posters, but usually he'll come around to see Arthur to drink sherry, won't he? And in the 2 we watched, disappointingly, there were no sherry scenes.
There were no sherry scenes.
There was a mention of it, but because it was 8 o'clock in the morning,
it was a trifle early.
He didn't get his sherry at all. Their dog's called Woofles as well.
Yes,
that's a good name for a dog. But yeah, Arthur wants to get away from it all, I think, for Christmas. They go off to a hotel, don't they?
Yes.
A really sort of unattended hotel.
Yes.
Which has got a deaf waiter who actually is the bit that made me laugh the most.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you should laugh at him. But
possibly not,
but you said it was Decider Draith from Full Circle.
Leonard Maguire.
Okay.
Yes.
Also there is James Grout.
Yes.
Who's got his niece with him.
Who doesn't look that much... doesn't look that much younger than him. She sees a bit of stuff.
All right, is that what it is?
Yeah.
And there's this trio sort of playing on the violin or something. They're playing April Showers badly. Yeah. There's also a line which did make me laugh about a new strain of virus that's going around. That's why nobody's basically gone to the hotel for Christmas. They're all staying at home.
Yes.
That's a bit weird, isn't it?
It is a little bit, yes.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's all fairly standard sitcom stuff, because then they want to go back home where there's a big party going on, and then they run out of petrol, and they got to walk all the way home. I did quite like the bit where William Gaunt says, follow that star in the east to get home. And I don't know if you know your astronomy that well, but it's not going to be the Star of Bethlehem. It's probably going to be Venus.
Yes.
So, but yeah, at home, Trevor's on the malt whiskey, isn't he? I couldn't quite work out which one it was, because that sort of thing always interests me.
Well, he had it with the label away, didn't he? Otherwise, you have to make a label up.
Well, no, I mean, you've got Rice Krispies on display, haven't you?
There is that, yeah.
And in the later episode, you've got a load of cornflakes, so I don't see why you can't advertise whiskey. And in the end, Trevor and Arthur end up in bed together. Well, on bed, don't they? Because they've still got their clothes on.
Yes.
And it did make me think it was a bit sort of Morecambe and Wisey.
Yeah.
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 But they've got quite a good sort of back and forth relationship.
Yes.
And Michael Shalva Martin's quite good at drunk acting, isn't he?
Is, yeah.
Because he's worried about what the neighbours are going to say, and then William Gaunt points out that he is the neighbours, so it doesn't really matter.
No.
But yeah, it's quite fun. It's not overly Christmassy, and it is a fairly standard sort of sitcom-y plot, I guess you could say. But didn't think it was too bad, did you?
No, it was. Yeah.
I mean, the schedule for that day, frankly, this is Boxing Day 1984, and I said, well, we put the sort of trailer up for it, and then I was having to cut out a load of faff, basically, like gymnastics and boring films. So I think people are complaining about the Christmas schedule this year.
Yes.
But to be honest, 1984's Boxing Day one isn't brilliant.
No.
You've got Junior Kickstart, Kung Fu, Flight of the Phoenix, Olympic Gymnastics, Final Score, Bob's Christmas Full House, No Place Like Home, and Escape to Victory, and Dallas.
Yeah.
Oh, and Miss Marple, The Body in the Library, Part 1. And Dave Allen, that's okay. And Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton. But nothing really jumps out at me from that schedule.
There's nothing particularly exciting there.
And I think that's where something like No Place Like Home, it's very much, it fills the time. It's got no great pretensions to greatness as such.
Yeah.
But it presents you with a family you don't mind spending time with.
No.
You know, there's nobody really objectionable. Although Daniel Hill, I thought was quite sort of. I was quite surprised that he's a bit sort of leery, isn't he?
Yes, you're not used to seeing him in that kind of part. Have you ever seen him in Waiting for God?
Yes.
He's not a very nice character in that either.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I'm sure he's absolutely lovely in real life.
Well, I'm sure he is. But yeah, not bad. Then we'll jump on to 1987.
Yes.
Where there's nothing Christmassy at all, is there?
It just feels like a normal episode that's been dropped down onto whichever day it was on over Christmas.
Yeah, as I said, IMDb seems to think it was shown in October.
Yes.
But Genome, there's no R against it in Genome.
No, so we're assuming it's not a repeat.
Yeah, I mean there is an R against a lower low.
All right.
For that night. The description is, Arthur becomes a local hero after foiling a supermarket raid. What do you think of this one then? Better or...
I think this one's probably not quite so good.
Yeah.
Because you haven't got as many as the family in it.
No.
You've got new characters in it, because obviously we're now on to sort of fifth season.
Yeah.
So you've Daniel Hill's characters left. You've got the change of actor for Nigel. And one of the sons you don't see at all.
Yeah.
The other son.
Even John Watkins has regenerated
Yes.
into John E. Watkins.
And it's spelt differently as well, isn't it?
John now.
Yes, he's suddenly got an H in his name.
Yeah, so he's got an extra couple of points in Scrabble for his name. Yeah.
And of course you've got the change in the actress playing Vera. Now I don't think I saw this series because I only ever remember Marcia Warren as Vera, and I think she is better. This actress, instead of doing it her own way, she seems to be trying to do it as an impression of Marcia Warren. I'm not entirely sure it works.
I mean, Bread sort of does this as well.
Yeah.
Bread regenerates a few characters as well.
But they do it in their own way. They don't sort of do an impression of the previous actor.
Okay.
So...
But yeah, I mean, it's a bit more complicated, the plot, I think. Interesting, you get a bit of sort of background into Beryl, in that she was good at hockey at school and a former head girl.
Yes.
I mean, we have to say, this is relentlessly middle class, isn't it? This whole setup.
You don't really get working class sitcoms. I mean, you have had working class sitcoms because, of course, Steptoe and Son is working class and On the Buses. But for the BBC, with family sitcoms, I don't really think you get a working class sitcom until Bread comes along.
Yeah. But yeah, interesting that he's written for Romeo D. Jones, so, you know, swings and roundabouts, I guess.
Yes.
But it all starts off, there was a raid at the supermarket and £20,000 was stolen. Well, Arthur really sort of got in the way, didn't he?
Yes.
Because he's made in the papers to be a big hero, isn't he? But it's not really quite like that.
No.
He sort of accidentally sort of hit one with his car or something, wasn't it? And then one ran off. He's bought a whole load of newspapers home.
Yes.
Which I guess you'd probably do.
Yeah.
Because he's quite sort of proud of himself for having done this. And he's going to get an award and presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Though he's a little disappointed when it turns out to be a grocery voucher for 20 quid.
Yes.
Do you think that's a little mean?
A little, yes. I could have done 100.
Yeah. But later on, he finds £5,000 in a bundle that has been missed or something. It's ended up in a box.
In a box that he put his sherry in that he bought. But then you get this usual dilemma thing that forms a lot of these kind of sitcoms of, do you keep the money or do you give it back?
Yeah.
And then you get the thing of, he decides to give it back, and how does he give it back? Because he's had it for 2 days. So how does he explain it?
Yeah. Because you've got Anthony the accountant now, haven't you?
Who's actually played by an actor who will go on to be in Waiting for God.
Oh, right, okay.
It's Tom's son in it. So.
Oh, right, okay. I wondered where I recognised him from. He had one of those faces. So who's this? Andrew Terrell.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. He's quite an odd character.
Yes. He doesn't quite ever finish his sentences, does he?
Yeah, because he's an accountant, and one of his clients has been claiming for a one-armed bandit as a dependent relative or something. I quite like that. It's just the sheer strangeness of it. But yeah, Arthur's sort of stringing everybody along about whether he will give him the money or not.
Or keep it,
or keep it, because he goes in the bath with it and sort of rests his head on it. That could have ended badly, couldn't it? Imagine me, with a load of money up me neck. But yeah, meanwhile, the ladies have been doing sponsored knitting, haven't they? And later on, you found out that Vera's made an incredibly long, multicoloured scarf, which ends up around the neck of TV's Michael Sharville-Martin.
It does,
which is being pulled on by the dog, I think.
Yeah.
Out of frame.
Out of shot.
Yeah. It's a very long scarf to have got just for that one joke.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it came from, but it's not a Tom Baker scarf.
No, it's one colours, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to be specially made, but yeah. So then they've got the vicar's wife round, haven't they? That's pure Terry and June, isn't it?
Yes.
Getting the vicar's wife round.
I don't think ever in my life I've had the vicar's wife in.
I couldn't spot a vicar's wife, no.
So.
But yeah, or the moral dilemma. But Arthur then hands her the £5,000 for her church appeal.
Yeah. And
she's quite happy to take it at first, isn't she? But eventually they sort of sort things out. But then he's got to get the problem of giving them the money back.
Yes. It's like,
because he's sort of held on to it for a few days, and how do you do it? So he and Anthony sort of sneak into the shop
they
try and
sneak into the shop.
Well, they go into the shop and
try and sneak around.
Yeah, and stick it in a box or something. I did like the line he had to say, "I've already got one, but I'd like a bigger one." Is referring to his box, of course. But then Anthony ends up being detained by the detectives as he leaves the premises. They don't let him get far, do they?
No.
I suppose because there's a camera in the way, so he can't escape.
Probably. Yes.
It's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Standard stuff. But should you always crowbar Christmas into a Christmas special? I think you can get fed up of it.
Yeah, I can understand it, and I suppose there's only so many Christmas plots you can do.
Yeah.
Before you sort of run out.
Yeah.
Especially in sitcom, because there's only so many different sort of permutations.
And so many of these shows, I think, work through the repetition of the characters and the familiarity of the situation. And especially in a weird Christmas like we're going to experience this year, I think a bit of stability doesn't hurt, does it? No. So yeah, it fulfills a slightly different function to maybe your classic Christmas episodes, but not necessarily the worse for that. So yeah, I quite enjoyed just doing those again. I mean, it's not a show I necessarily sit down and do a sort of binge of.
Well, it's quite hard to get hold of now.
But the fact that just these 2 episodes are available, I went, oh, that's quite interesting, and I wouldn't mind looking at them again. So I'm glad we chose them. But yeah, you enjoy them?
Yes. Yeah. It was nice to revisit that world.
Yeah.
Because it's quite a sort of cosy one, isn't it? even if, you know, the characters are a bit old and do
weirdly, because we're talking 84 to 87, in my head 87's quite recent, but 84's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And do you know why that is? Because I first got my video recorder in 1987.
All right. Okay.
So everything post 1987 feels recent. Okay. And everything pre 1987 is ancient history to me.
Okay.
In 1984, I was still audio recording, you know.
Gosh, okay.
So there you go. But there we go. So that's us done and dusted.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there is no place like home on the Around the Archives sofa at the moment.
Yes.
I think. So we'll say thank you to everyone for helping this year.
Yes, thank you for listening.
Yes, I think everybody's done some fantastic work this year.
Yes.
And it has been under difficult circumstances.
Yes,
so,
very strange year this year.
So we do appreciate all the help we've had, all the listeners we've had. And yes, we'll just say to you, Happy Christmas from everybody
Christmas,
at Round the Archives.
Yes, let's hope 2021 turns out to be a better year.
Okay. Happy Christmas then.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Peace on earth.
What's that?
Your ruddy turkey, Trevor.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
Oh, Christmas.
That was episode 55 of Round the Archives.
Starring Lisa Parker, Andrew Trowbridge, Martin Holmes, Ben Baker, Paul Chandler, Nick Goodman and Cuthbert the Robot.
On the musical side, you heard Dan Tate and Paul Chandler.
The scripts for No Place Like Home were by John Watkins.
And the producer was Robin Nash.
Well, that's it for another week from the studios of EBC. But Rod and Emu and the gang will no doubt be back at the same time next week.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come into the BBC, but I was taking a shortcut. So I'm going to bingo. Goodbye. Goodbye, viewers.
I'm so sorry about that. Excuse me. Speak. Oh, yes, sir. No, sir, I didn't invite her in. No, I think she's escaped from somewhere.